So over to you, Ludo.
Thank you. Yeah, what I want to look at is my name's Ludo Chapman, and I'm a facilitator. So what I do is I work with companies of all shapes and sizes to help them think through and untangle strategic challenges, essentially. So I design workshops to enable them to think through problems that they've got, or ideas that they've got, or the startup of a business that they want to start up. All of those things I work with companies to do. So I'm not a consultant. I structure things. I get people to think for themselves and devise the answers themselves. So that's what I do. And what I'd like to do today is just to share with you some of the observations I've come across of the really important things that I think companies should be thinking about doing, tools that you can use to help you through this process. So that's what I'd like to do today. And if it's okay, I'll just share my screen and put a presentation up. I'm hoping this all works like a dream for you. So can everyone see the screen okay? Yep, brilliant. Perfect. Okay. Now, the first thing I'd like to say is, I'm not one of those people who doesn't want to be interrupted. I'd rather be interrupted throughout this. I'd like to make it as interactive as possible. So please, you don't have to mute. If you want to make a comment or you want to ask me a question, I'd much rather you did it at the time I'm talking, so it's all relevant to you. So don't hesitate to ask questions. Also, I'm going to be asking you questions as well at times, to ask about your experiences and stuff. So please stay silent, because there's nothing worse than me sitting here in silence. So do interact as much as possible. And I don't know about this, Ollie, but I'm quite happy to share the presentation and we can distribute that round afterwards if you're happy to do that.
Yeah, I'll be delighted to do that, Ludo. Be a pleasure.
Okay, so what I'd like to start with is, I think it's really important. One of the things I find in all companies, but particularly early stage companies, is that they don't spend enough time testing. And when I talk about testing, this could be an idea for a new business. It could be an idea for a new product, an idea for a new service, an idea for anything. What they tend to do is leap in. And if I just illustrate this with a slide here, they have an idea and they jump straight to a plan. And what I know and what I've seen over many years of doing this is that actually there's a huge amount of untangling that needs to be done before you should commit to a plan. And what I would like to talk about today, for example, it's really important. Let's say you're launching a new business or you're launching a new product or a new service. It's really important to understand, are the people out there that want to buy this? Are they going to be willing to pay for it? And if they're willing to pay for it, how much are they going to be willing to pay for it? Is this going to solve the problems that they've got in their business for their jobs? Is it going to provide them with the gains they want? Is it going to provide them with the and eliminate all the problems that they've got in their business? So it's really important, and there are a number of tools to do this with. There's a really cool canvas called the value proposition canvas, and what this does is it encourages you to go out and talk to your customers about their work, about their job, about the things they're trying to achieve, about the gains they're looking for and the pains they're suffering. So the value proposition canvas is one I'd certainly recommend. And it really helps you to think about what the customer is doing and whether what the customer wants is mapping onto what your product does. So that's something I'd like you to think about and have a look at. Not something I don't have time to go through today, but it's a really useful tool. The tool I will look at is a tool called the business model canvas. Has anyone used that? Has anyone used the business model canvas?
No.
No, some of you have, some of you haven't. Some of the hands are up. So yeah,
there's some really good books on that. It's from Strategizer, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and I'm going to take you through how the best to get the most out of that. So I'll talk to you about that in a moment. So the idea of a business model canvas is it enables you to design your business idea or whatever it might be, and to look at all the elements. I'm going to take you through that. So these are the kind of tools that I would strongly recommend you use to test any idea, any service, any product, any new thing that you're doing. And when you're doing this, you should be, and the thing I'm talking about here is designing something. So you design an idea, you design your business model, and you go out and you talk to your customers, you test it, you come back, and based upon the feedback that they've given you, you may tweak it, you go out again. And what I'm suggesting is you should do that over and over again until you're absolutely confident that what you've got, both from a value proposition and a business model, is going to resonate with what the customer wants. When you've got that confidence, then it's great, go off and execute it. But don't do the opposite, which is go off and plan it, execute it, and then realize too late that actually no one out there wants it, no one wants to pay for it, and it's not addressing the needs that the customer has. So I can't emphasize this enough. Don't spend lots of money on doing this. I'm not saying that this is an expensive thing. It should be really cheap. It should be quick. And the kind of things I'm talking about here are things like going out and talking to your customers, interviewing them in a structured way. When I set my business up, I interviewed 70 to 80 companies to find out how they develop their strategy. And it made a huge difference to the way I actually set the business up and what I developed the business to be. And I did this over and over again, kept tweaking my business model, tweaking my value proposition. And indeed, in doing so, I picked up a whole load of work at the same time, which was really good. So do think about this and the kind of things I'm talking about. So I've talked about interviews. You can set up dummy websites. So a website to say, this is what we're going to do. Would you be interested? Or call to action of some kind. You don't have to spend lots of money on this, but it is really important that you do it. Okay. So that's my first piece of advice. And what I'd like to do is in that untangling piece, just to look at some of the tools in a bit more depth that I think are really useful. And there are loads that you can use in here. I'm just picking 3 that I think are the most powerful 3 that I use with startups and companies of all sizes. So the first one we'll look at is the business model canvas, and I'm going to go through that in some detail. This looks a bit sad, but it's called this is all about establishing risks and understanding risks. And then the third thing I want to look at is customer acquisition and how much it costs. So 3 things I think are really important when you're thinking about a business. And as I've said, there are many other tools, but in the time I've got, the 3 I've chosen are those. So to begin with, what I'd like to do is to go through business modeling. And we all talk about business models, but what is a business model? So I'd like to ask you to come back and tell me what you all think a business model is.
Is it a framework for how you think your business might work?
That is a very good description, Danielle. Perfect. Yep. Any other suggestions? Anyone who's used it, how would they describe it? Go, Thomas.
Yeah, I'm trying to formulate it. I've got it. I've got the book on my desk. It's a framework. It's a model that shows you all the elements of your business at a high level, so you can map out and understand your business very quickly.
Great. That's a very good description. And you can put that book away now because I'll be embarrassed to be caught out. No, I'm joking. Anyway, so let me explain what a business model is. There was a guy called Saul Chapman who came up with a concept and an idea of what a business model is. And I think his definition is absolutely perfect because it's simple and it says everything it needs to do. So a business model in his definition was how an organization creates value for customers. So in other words, it's really important that any business creates value for the people it's selling to, how it captures value for itself, in other words, how you make money, and very importantly, how you deliver that value continuously and consistently. So if you think about any organization, those are the 3 things that every organization or business needs to do. It needs to create value for the customers, otherwise it's got no proposition. It needs to make money for itself, whether it's charitable or for profit, doesn't matter. It's still got to create some value, otherwise it can't continue. And the really critical thing is you've got to be able to continually deliver that value continuously and consistently. And what happened, a guy called Alex Osterwalder, who Thomas was mentioning, comes from a company called Strategizer. He wrote a PhD to see if you could find on a single sheet of paper a means of putting everything about a business that captures those 3 elements onto a single sheet. And he came up with what's called the business model canvas. And this is what it looks like. I'm not expecting you to read all the tiny little text on this. That's not what I'm needing you to do. What I do want to do is just to describe this. And I'm going to go through this with you and give you a little example of it and show you what the power of it is. But what it does, just as Thomas said, is it creates a high level strategic view of your business in a great visual way that allows you and your team to describe your business, perhaps to investors, to challenge what you're doing. So to, you know, say, hang on a second, why are we doing that? Why aren't we doing that? And to design lots of different options for business models, all using a really common language.
Mm.
And the canvas itself, sorry, did someone say something?
No, I just went, ooh, sorry.
Ooh.
Ooh.
I've got a quick comment.
Yep.
I love how the previous slide is very much everything is customer centric. It's
Yep.
all about the customer. It's all about the customer. What value are they going to see? How are they going to use it? What's the value? Almost literally, what's the value proposition? What's in it for you? And this part here, I've actually used this before, but I've used it more at a business unit. So from a sales, building out a sales team, you know, what are the key objectives? What's the financial implications? What are the risks? You can actually take this from a business and actually use it as an individual for your individual business units right across the company.
Yeah, very good comment. Very good comment. Now, what I'd like to do is I've seen a lot of people use this. I just want to go through how I use this and just to give you an example so you understand all the elements. So what I want to do is just to first of all tell you there are 9 boxes on a business model, and that's encapsulating, as Thomas said earlier, every single element of a business. Now, when you're using this, I tend to always start on the right-hand side and talk about what are the customer segments I'm going to sell to. In other words, who am I going to create value for? Now, one of the pitfalls that I see people fall into in this is that they say, I've got such a good product, everyone's going to want it. And that's a really dangerous thing to do because selling and marketing to endless customers across the world and everybody is crazy. What you've got to do when you're talking about your customer segments is focus very much on the customer segments that you think you've got the greatest chance of success and focus on those first, then go to the next, then go to the next, and then go to the next. Because if you try and have a scattergun approach, your sales and marketing is very, very difficult to do. So customer segments are the people that you want to create value for. And let's just take an example. So let's say we're Nespresso. You all heard of Nespresso. Who would be the customer segments for Nespresso? So all take your microphones off because I'm going to ask you lots of questions in a minute. Who would be the customers of Nespresso?
Busy professionals.
Busy professionals. Yeah, keep going.
Coffee drinkers.
Right. So the first one would be coffee drinkers. Yep. So coffee lovers. Now, to pick up on Danielle's point, busy executives. There's also this element of businesses. Yep. So that's an interesting difference because coffee lovers are individuals. Businesses are these corporates who want all their staff to have really nice coffee. So they're very focused on two very clear customer segments. So coffee lovers and businesses. Then when you're using this, the second thing you think about is the value proposition. And the value proposition, when you're doing this, think about 2 elements. It's an overarching description of your value that you're delivering to your customers. What are the benefits that you're giving to them? And then what features of your service or products are you delivering to them? So what products are you serving? And I'm keeping this really high level for Nespresso. So in the case of Nespresso, they might describe their value proposition as creating the perfect cup of coffee in a convenient and consistent way. And that sort of says what it does on the tin. So what are they doing? They're providing machines and they're providing capsules that help them to create the perfect cup of coffee in a convenient and consistent way. So when you're doing this, this is really powerful, this piece, because this will help you with all your marketing. Because if you can succinctly describe what your value proposition is, you can describe what you're going to deliver to your customers. And more importantly, and I haven't put this within Nespresso, what is the value that you're actually delivering for them? Well, in their case, they sort of said, it's the perfect cup of coffee. It's convenient to make. It consistently makes good, high quality things, and so on and so forth. So you've got to put all those elements in. And when you've done that, it's a really useful thing to have because you can start plastering that on your website and all the materials that you put out to your customers. So that's what the value proposition piece is. And that is probably of all things the most important. And when I was talking about testing, you've got to be able to be confident that what you're saying in your value proposition box is actually what customers want. And if you're uncertain about that in any way, go out and ask them. Yeah. Okay, let's quickly go through the rest of this with you. So the next thing is the channels, and the channels are the ways in which you are going to reach your customers. In other words, how are you going to get your customers to evaluate your product? How are you going to let them test it? How are you going to let them buy it? All the things and the channels that you want to engage with your customers. And there'll be all sorts of different ways of doing this. There's websites, there's direct selling through distribution, all sorts of different ways. But for someone like Nespresso, it can be done online, through retailers, TV advertising, the phone, all sorts of different ways in which they're engaging with their customers. And when you're doing this for your business, just think about all the ways that you're going to do it. Are you going to do events? Are you going to have a strong website? Are you going to use social media? Are you going to use TV advertising? What are the ways in which you're going to get your customers to work with you? So that's the next box. The next box to think about is your customer relationships. Now, customer relationships are really important. And this is talking about when you've got a customer and you've got them engaged with you, how do you look after them essentially? Are you going to have, for example, if you're in a, let's say you're in a business and you're selling a massively expensive product at 100,000 quid, you wouldn't expect them to just have all the support you need online. You'd expect, and you've spent that amount of money, to have a one-to-one relationship with the company, with a customer care or an account manager. But if you're Ryanair, for example, and you're just flogging seats on aeroplanes, you try and get hold of a customer service human being. You don't. It's a completely different, it's a self-service customer relationship, yeah, that uses the website and phone and so on. So customer relationships are the ways in which you engage your customers when you've got them on board. And in Nespresso's case, they've got this community called the Nespresso Club where they all help one another and test new coffees and so on. They've got their website, they've got their call center. So that's the way. And obviously they've got shops and where you've got people in the retail shops to help them. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Those 4 boxes represent how you create value for your customer. Yep. So the element we're talking about, creating value for your customers, all dealt with there. The next thing you think about is these revenue streams. Now, revenue streams talk about how you're going to make money, and there are all sorts of different ways of making money. So give me some examples of ways companies set themselves up to make money. So if I say, one obvious one would be I sell a product. How else might people make money? What other methodologies could people use to make money?
Services.
Services, yep.
Sponsorship.
Sponsorship, yep. Brokering, yep. And other things to think about in here, there are lots of different ways. I can sell a product, I can sell a service, or I can sell a product as a service. In other words, take an example of a business that, maybe has a really cool product for, testing the air quality in London. Yep. I could go to the council and say, I'm going to sell you 25,000 products, or I could sell it in a completely different way and say, I will provide you with a service that tells you what the air quality is in any part of your local area. Yeah. Now, if you think about the customer's more interested in knowing about the pollution than they are knowing about the product. So getting your revenue stream right is really important. And you really got to think about, are you going to use a subscription service? Are you going to sell them a product? Are you going to sell them a service? Think about the revenue structure that you're going to use, and think about the customer and the way in which they want to engage with you and the way they want to pay you for whatever it is that you do. And I've worked with lots of companies who started off selling products and changed completely to selling a service. And when you're talking about investors love recurring revenue. So if for example, if you take the example of a product company, if I sell a product once for £30,000 to a customer, that's the end of it. Whereas if I say to them, I'm going to sell this service to you on a subscription basis, I've got recurring revenue year after year after year. and that tends to attract customers. So do think about revenue streams very carefully and think about what the customer would want. And
Ludo?
yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick one on this revenue streams is, as a startup, I assume that these are all assumptions
Absolutely.
of where you can make revenue. Do you put them all in there? Because sometimes you can think outside the box and say, we can get commission, we can get subscriptions, etc. And the other thing is so do you put that all in there now? And also you said about test.
Yeah.
Do you put that to the side? Because what you could do is say, here's the revenue streams that we assume, and here to the right is the ones that we're going to test on, because you're never going to know what that is until you start testing.
Exactly. And, you know, I'm working with, it's a very interesting question. So first of all, yes, I put all the options in there. Second question, and to answer that with a real life example, is I'm working with a customer at the moment who provides a bit of software for scheduling for doctors and nurses and personal trainers and so on to make their scheduling a lot easier. And they have still yet to nail their pricing model after 3 years, but they are constantly testing it. So they test a subscription model and they tweak it slightly, go out to a customer and try it. So it is really important to test it. Whether you test it live and actually are brave enough to do it as they're doing with real customers, or whether prior to setting up the business, you go out and talk to customers, I would certainly at the early stages of a business, I'd recommend that latter one. Go out and talk to them and say, this is what we're going to provide. Which ways would you prefer to pay for it? Would you prefer to pay for it on a subscription? Would you want to lease the product? So I don't know what the businesses are, but there are all sorts of different ways. But do spend a lot of time thinking about this, because if you get this right, you're laughing. Get it wrong, you could be in big trouble.
Yeah, and so one more thing on this revenue streams, should you put timelines in there? Like, we expect it from month 1 or month 10 or 2 years down the line, or
not on here. That wouldn't be put on here. This is simply to scope out how you're going to set your business up. That bit of detail will probably come in the plan that you develop once you've done all your testing.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah. So in the case of Nespresso, just to take this through, their revenue streams are basically asset sales, and they make 4% of their revenue from selling machines, 92% from capsules. Free machines, that's quite an interesting one. They give a lot of free machines away to businesses. So there are lots of different models that you can use in revenue streams. Freemium model, which is, you know, you buy the asset for free, but then you capture them because that asset needs ink, or it needs coffee, or it needs something. So very clever little model, gets all that recurring revenue. So think about that whole revenue stream really, really carefully. Okay, but this model is really nice, the Nespresso model, because you've locked them in. As soon as they bought the machine, at the time when they were the only people making the machines, they'd locked them in forever. So while their IP lasted out, it was a joyous event for them, I have to say.
I've got a quick question,
Yep.
Ludo. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, I can now.
Okay. The question, sorry, because I've got the, that's probably better. Quick question, you don't have risk on this business model canvas?
No, that will come back. That's a separate entity that I'll come back to shortly. So the business model canvas is one tool in a process. And later when I'm talking about planning out, I will put this into context as to how you'd use it. So this is one element of something you need to think about when you're setting up your business and or you're incorporating something new into your business. Yeah, so I will come back to risk shortly. Does that answer your question, Ruben?
Yeah, it does. It's just that when I started looking at the revenue streams, straight away I thought, you know, what about the OEMs aftermarket?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good point. I'll come to that hopefully and answer that question. So when we look at revenue streams, what you've just done there is you've looked at how you're going to capture revenue for yourselves. Yeah. So we now are clear on how we're capturing revenue for the business. Yeah. Now we're going on to this left-hand side of the screen, and we're going to look at this part, these 4 boxes here. And the first thing I suggest you look at is the key activities. And this again is really important. think about the key activities that you want to be expert in that are required to create and deliver your value proposition to your customers. Yeah. So these are the things that you are going to do or are required all the time and that you are going to be experts in. So let's take a software company. For a software company, you're going to need software engineers, you're going to need design engineers, you're going to need people who can go off and sell and market it and so on and so forth. But in a product company, you might need engineers that are going to make a product. So you're going to need distribute, all sorts of things. So think about the things that you're going to do yourselves. So in the case of Nespresso, they are going to do all their own distribution. They're going to produce the products. They're going to do the R&D, the research and development. They're going to do their own marketing. They're going to do their sales. They're going to do their support. So think about the core things that your business is going to do in order to create your value proposition. Yeah. Don't go down into the minute detail in this. This is, as Thomas said, it's a high level view of your business and the critical things that are required by your value proposition. Then you need to think carefully about what are the key resources you need. Now, key resources are the things that your business needs, whether physical or non-physical, to create your value proposition. So, for example, I put in here, Nestle are very lucky in having money behind them. So the money is really critical. And in any startup, you're going to need money. They've got a very strong brand, and the celebrities like George Clooney, they've got coffee experts, they've got IP, they've got factories. So you need to think when you're in a startup, what is it I'm going to need? Do I need an office? Do I need a factory? I've obviously need good staff. I need expertise. I need knowledge. I need money. Is there any intellectual property I'm going to be able to register? That would be a really critical resource. So think about all the things that your business is going to need in order to develop its value proposition. And then think about, over on the left-hand side, the things that you don't want to do or you're not expert in and you're going to need partners to do for you. And as I talked about with startups, you know, it might be you're not experts in marketing, so partner with a good marketing organization. It might be that, you know, you aren't going to do all your finances because you've got no financial knowledge. Use an accountant as a key partner. So key partners are the people that you're going to bring in to help you with your key activities that you don't necessarily want to do yourself. And in Nestle's case, that's machine makers. They get the machines made elsewhere, and coffee bean specialists. And then finally, you need to think about your costs and what are the major costs of your business. So in the case of Nespresso, it's marketing, branding, R&D, production, and distribution. And that all makes up the deliver piece. So if we go full circle now, this one sheet of paper enables you to describe your business as to how you create value, how you capture value, and how you deliver value. Does that make sense to everybody? And I cannot tell you how useful this is, and it's something that I would suggest you use a lot. In the early stages of your business, you should have this on a wall, massive one. I mean, I've got these huge canvases about the size of the A0, massive things that you put on a wall with post-it notes, and you keep that. And as you're developing your business, you tweak it. You pull a post-it note off, put a new one in because a customer said this, they'd like that. You can. It's a really flexible way of designing a business. And I've actually seen companies use a canvas on a wall in a presentation to an investor, because I've just told you the story of Nespresso just using a series of post-it notes on a canvas. So it can be a really useful tool for that as well.
Ludo, apart from a thing on a wall or pitching to an investor, would you put this in a pitch deck?
Yep. Yeah. I personally would. Lots of people do. Some people don't, but I certainly would, because it's a really, I mean, I can look at that for any bit. I mean, if I go and talk to businesses about, you know, helping them, I will take a blank one of these and a little A4 and just start, they'll describe what they're doing. And in probably 20 minutes, I've understood their business at a very high level, but it's a really useful thing. And investors want to know things quickly like that. So if you can describe it very quickly in a visual way, it's great.
I'm planning to put this into my pitch deck and my investment profiles and all of my Innovate UK grant applications, just because the idea that I have is complex, and It's easy enough to slap it on this and say, these are the main elements, and this is how I generate value for businesses.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Good. Really pleased to hear that. And that's a very good example of how it's going to be used. Good. Okay. Let me find my mouse. Remember I said about testing and assessing. You really want, once you've developed your business model, it's important that you stand back and assess it. And you're pretty critical of yourself about, you know, someone mentioned about gaps, someone mentioned about assumptions and all sorts of things. You've got to be sure and confident that you've checked about the assumptions and you've validated those assumptions with evidence from customers and whoever you want to talk to, and that you have looked at it and thought, well, actually, can I deliver this? Do I have the right resources? Have I got all the activities in place, and so on and so forth? So do spend time critically assessing your business model. And there are really sort of 3 questions that I recommend you ask yourselves. First of all, is my idea desirable? Do customers want it? So that's, you know, testing your value proposition. Will they be able to find it? That's really going out and talking to customers and finding out how the channels are going to work. How do they want to come in and interact with you? How do you want them to evaluate you? And can you support it? In other words, what are you going to need to do, and what are they going to expect in the support element of your business? And I can't tell you how important that latter one is. I saw a business go under it was a really successful business. What happened is they had a product. It was a fantastic product. People loved it. People wanted it. They went out and they started launching this product. People bought it in their droves. What have they forgotten? They had no customer support. So people just had no means of getting customer support. They got pushed around all over the place because the company was trying to struggle to get customer support, lost everybody's, you know, confidence, and the business went bust. So it's not just having a great value proposition. It's about how do they find you? Can they find you? And can you support it? So those are questions you need to ask. The next question I suggest you need to ask yourself is this viable? Will the customers pay for it? Can you make money from it? How do they want to pay for it? Those kind of questions when you're talking about your revenue. So that's really critical, that you judge, you talk to yourself and say, am I confident that I've got answers to those? And then the final thing you need to think about, is can you build what it is, whether it's a service, a product, or whatever, and can you deliver it? In other words, have you got all the key activities? Have you got the necessary skills, the necessary people? Have you got enough money? Have you got the correct equipment, the location, all those kind of things? Have you and can you find the right partners to work with? And obviously, does your cost structure, is that less than the revenue that you're planning on making? And obviously you'd need to develop a proper financial model to look at that. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
They're supporting it a bit. I'm trying to build a business at the moment, or start a business, and when I start launching it, the support will be me and a couple of mates on the end of a phone, potentially. That supporting part has got to be built over time. So how would you suggest that is achieved? Because you can't just build support straight in at the very beginning and expect to have people to support your product from the start.
No, but the point I'm making is, as you see your business grow, do not lose sight of the importance of customer service. And I think, you know, just keep, this is why you should have this on the wall all the time, you know, which element is creaking. So if you're really successful when you launch your business and people come in their droves, then you think, well, hang on a second, God almighty, that's, you know, we've just had 30 customers come on board. We've got one person to look after them. Is that going to be enough? And if that sort of creak is felt, then put something in and say, right, we're going to have to get a new person on board to support us. So it's very much as you progress through your business. But it's just, all I'm saying is don't lose sight of it. Because what happens is people get really excited about the success of all this stuff going out the door and forgetting that if someone has a problem, we've got to support it. Does that make sense, Thomas? Good. Okay. Any other questions on this?
Yeah, I had a question about, hang on, let me muddle this out. My question was, if you are building something that has a purpose that is also slightly educational, does this change this model a little bit?
It changes it. When you say educational, I don't think it changes it dramatically, but obviously your value proposition is a social purpose value proposition as opposed to a purely financial one. So yes, there is also a version of this for purpose organizations where it's been slightly tweaked. And if you're interested in talking to me about that, I'd be happy to have a chat with you offline after the event, because there are certain different elements that you may want to consider differently. Can you just give me an example of what you might be doing?
Yeah, so I think, like, if, for example, you're trying to educate people that there could be a different way of doing something. So, for example, you know, but that's not something that's necessarily, like, people do want it, but they're not necessarily sure it exists or think it's possible, that kind of thing.
Sure. Okay. But I still think it would work in that instance, because you're providing value to somebody. You've got to define who the customers are. You've got to find them. You've got to keep them on board. So I think it probably would work with an educational piece. Where it slightly varies is when it's charitable. When you're trying to do something charitable and it's not necessarily a business proposition, it's more about, so there are variants on this.
Yeah, I guess there's also, like, in organizations, like if you look at, like, Olio, for example, like, where they have supporters. So they're kind of like, they're not a charity per se, but they are, and they have like a subscription model and stuff, but it's like, yeah, you're getting people to sort of buy into the problem and then, like, support it. So
absolutely. And that's all about this customer relationship piece and building a community. They've done really well in building that self-help community, if you like, and a lot of companies do that. I mean, I've got a piece of software I just bought the other day and I wanted to get some help, and the only way I can get help is to go into the software community. How do I do that? I have to log in and pay for a membership for it, blah, blah, blah. So clever little ruses. Okay, I'm conscious of time. How much time have I got, Ollie?
Yeah, we are.
I know how much time I've had, but it's an hour we're looking at for this whole session, is it?
Yeah, so overall it's 40 minutes plus a 20-minute Q&A. So,
well, I'm doing the Q&A during it, so I'm going to take the full hour up the presentation.
So you crack on.
Good. Okay. Right. The next thing I want to talk about, and this comes back to you, Ruben. I haven't mentioned risk, and one of my observations is that companies do need to think carefully about risk very early on, and they should think about risk throughout the process of their business. Yep. You should continually be looking at the environment around your business. You should be looking at what threats, what competitors are coming in. You should be doing all of that all the time. And one of the things that I would, I'm not going to go through a particular tool for it, but I would recommend you do is probably every quarter, do just a quick sweep around your environment. Who are the competitors that are coming in? Have there been any changes in economics? Are there any, so just keep thinking about your environment, and based on that, think about risk. People get really hung up about risk, and I just want to talk to you about a method I use with startups that I just think is so simple, and it's called a pre-mortem. Now that may sound a bit over the top, but it's really simple. And essentially what I'm saying here is, if you think about anything, it's better to think about what could cause something to die than it is let something die and then think, oh God, we should have thought about this, we should have thought about that. So that's the concept of a pre-mortem, and it's really simple. Get your team together and ask the question, or state the fact. Imagine it's 3 years' time and your company has failed. Yeah, so really clever way of doing this. Just set them in a room and say, look, guys, 3 years ahead or 1 year ahead, it's up to you how long it is, your business has failed. Why might this have happened? And get them to feed you all the things that they think could cause your business to fail. Some things they'll come up with will be like Brexit and coronavirus and stuff like that. Some of those you can't control. You may be able to put in mitigating actions, but it's the things that you think you can control that are really critical. And think about the things that scare them and keep them up at night. And just get them to share all of these, get them to put Post-it notes and whack them all over a wall somewhere. Yeah. Then, having put them all over a wall, go through and ask yourselves, how likely is this to happen? And if it were to happen, how big an impact would it have on my business? So by doing that, you're selecting the critical ones that you think you need to keep a track of. Yeah. When you're doing your planning, make sure that the ones that you've selected that are critical, that your team have come up with, there is an associated action that you've got in place in your plans that is set up to mitigate that. So, for example, if someone came up and said, customers may not want to pay for it, pay as much as we want, that's fine. But what you've got to do, if that's a concern that you've got and you think that's going to cause your business to fail, you've got to have an action in place that says, we're going to go and talk to 25 customers to ensure that we've got our pricing model right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then look on the internet at the concept of a risk register. And I would certainly, as you get bigger and you start growing, I would recommend putting together a risk register and just reviewing it every quarter, just to make sure that you're on top of all the risks in your business. And if you do that, and the whole idea of a pre-mortem is you're trying to prevent your business from dying.
Ludo, could this be sort of stitched into a SWOT analysis?
Yep, absolutely.
Regular, maybe a 3-month, every 3-month frequency SWOT analysis.
Absolutely. Let me I'll talk about the planning. I just wanted to talk about that as a concept, and I'll put it into context as to how you might use it and where you'd use it. So I think this is this is just a tool I think I've used a lot, and I think is really simple, really easy to use, and is great. Any other questions on it? No? Okay. The next thing I've observed that I think is really important for startups is understanding the cost of acquiring customers. Now, this is quite a complex model and formula, but I want to try and simplify it just to get your head around it, because what happens is companies think, right, I'm going to sell something. What they don't think about is how much money am I going to spend in order to get that customer. And if that amount of money that you're spending isn't equivalent or less than the amount that you're going to get from the customer, then you shouldn't be in business. So I wanted to try and explain this really simply. There are two basic elements: how much you spend on your on your sales and marketing, divided by the number of customers that you acquire with that investment. And that's called the cost of acquiring a customer. Yep. Sorry, I just saw some stuff coming in on the chat and I'm not looking at that. If you can tell me if there's anything, Ollie, that comes in on chat.
No, it's fine. It's, people, some of them have got to leave early. So
okay, no worries. So that amount of money must be less than, yeah, the lifetime value of your customers. And that's easily worked out. So how much profit are you going to make by times the number of times they purchase from you or pay you? Okay, now that all might seem very complicated, but let me just show you a couple of simple examples of this to explain it. So let's say a company is going to spend, and what you need to do is to think about what period of time you're going to be estimating. So let's say this company is looking at a year or 5 years, whatever, it doesn't matter really. Let's say this is 5 years. So in that period of time, they're going to spend £800,000 on their sales and marketing, and they're going to get 8,000 new customers. This is their forecast and their prediction. Yeah. So for every new customer, it costs them £100. Yeah. The lifetime value of that customer, they're going to get into a subscription model over 5 years and get paid £1,000 over a period of 5 years. So they're going to get a lifetime value of £5,000. Now you can probably work out that's a good model, because spend £100, get 5,000 per customer, tick. So that is a very good model. So it's worth you thinking about this. And if you can forecast and think about how much is it going to cost me to, and you know, when you're building your financial models, how much is it going to cost me in everything I do to try and attract a customer? How many customers am I going to get? And what's the lifetime value of them? And if they match like that, great. If they're more like this one, where you're spending £4,000 on acquiring a customer, but you're only getting a 1-year purchase from them, and you get 3,000 quid, you're obviously losing money there. So does that make sense? I've simplified it somewhat, but
yeah, Ludo, a really good one. I was in the taxi business.
Yeah.
So obviously cost of acquisition was really important.
Yeah.
Free now are going through a process now where they've got private hire and they've got taxis.
Yes.
And one of the questions is if you're going out to more customers, obviously your cost of acquisition can go down.
Yes.
Because digital platform. So they're going exactly through this. So on the private hire side, they're recruiting lots of customers, but their lifetime longevity is very, very small.
Exactly.
Yet the taxi side might cost a little bit more because they have to do it in a different way, but the long time is a lot better.
Exactly. Brilliant. So that's a very good example of this and the importance of thinking about it early, because you know a lot of expenditure can go into trying to attract a customer. You know, you might think making phone calls and going to events and doing all, but it's all a cost. It's all a cost of your business to try and find the customers that you want. You've got to make sure you attract, or you track that in your business. So that's very important.
Ludo, can I ask a question?
You certainly may.
So if it's not possible to understand the lifetime value of a customer, so it's an e-commerce business where you're selling a product, and you don't know whether that customer will buy another product off of you, how do you sort of calculate that?
You do worst case analysis and assume they're only going to buy one.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Would be my best advice there.
Hmm.
Okay. Conscious of time, what we've done today is I've tried to give you some, you know, insights into things to think about in that untangling phase, things that you want to think about to ensure that you're really going through a very sensible process to get to where you want to go. What I'd like to do now is to think about, right, we've done all of that and we're confident, we think we've got a business here. So what I'd like to do now is to think a bit more about strategic planning and to introduce you to a process and then to take you through some of the elements I would use to help deliver that. So this is the sort of a picture of the process that I think works for strategies. And what I'm talking about now is what am I going to do in my business? Yeah. So the first item on this diagram says develop strategy. What do I mean by that? Well, in here, what I would suggest you do is think about what's your vision, think about what your mission is, what's the business model. So you should have created a business model by this point. You should have done a pre-mortem, so you should have done your risks. You should have looked at your business environment, and having done all of that, get the team that you're working with, or indeed just do this with yourself. I mean, I'm a one-man band and I do it myself, and I actually do this process every year. So get your team together and work together to agree. So for this coming 12 months, what is the overarching strategy and the strategic objectives we want to achieve for the company in the next 12 months? And these are the high-level strategic things that you want to achieve, that you must achieve this year. Not things that you think you could do or you should do, just the things that you must do. Yeah. And these can be financial, they can be non-financial. Don't set too many. A classic failure of loads of businesses I work with is I say, what are your objectives for this year? And they bring out 3 pages of objectives. And I say, I'd actually like to see 2, 3, maybe 5 tops. So this level, those annual strategic objectives are very, 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 very critical strategic objectives. Then what you do is you say, okay, we've got the strategic objectives. Ask your team what they feel are the tactical objectives required to deliver the vision and mission, to deliver those annual objectives, to build and improve your business model, and to mitigate the risks. So this is what I do all the time with businesses. I facilitate sessions where I take them through this process. So I'll get them all to do some homework, and I'll come back and I'll say, right, give me all your ideas. And they'll just plaster me with tons and tons of things they want to do. I'll collect all those together. I'll cluster them into themes. So we'll have an objective set of groups. I'll say which of these are the most critical. I'll get them to prioritize them, and I'll ask them to choose the top 3 or 5 that they think are critical. Yeah, I'll carp up the others which we'll come back to in another quarter. And what I'm doing when you're doing quarterly, when you're doing tactical objectives, I strongly recommend that you plan on a quarterly basis. The reason I say that is in this world today, things change so quickly. If all your objectives are a 12-month period, so much can change in that 12 months. What will also happen is you won't look at them all the time. Whereas if you set quarterly objectives and do this process I'm suggesting here, having a monthly check-in, then going through a quarterly review, evaluating and tweaking and just keeping going in that cycle all the time, it ensures that you're constantly reviewing your strategy. Yeah. And it's not a difficult process. I do it with companies, and it probably, if I'm doing it in person, it takes a couple of days. If I'm doing it on Zoom, it actually takes 2 half-day sessions, at the end of which they've got their strategic plan, and it's done in really simple ways. Does that make sense to everybody? Does that answer the question about the risks as well? I didn't check in. Has he gone? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay, good.
You know the thing about when you said, oh, like if you're doing it over Zoom, it'll do like you do like 2 half-day sessions.
Yeah.
Does that depend on the size of the business? Does that make a difference to how long this takes, or it's just that's how long it takes?
I've done it with, 2 weeks ago, I was working with a company that was listed on the stock exchange, £750 million company. And I'm doing sessions with a startup in London who are doing air quality monitoring. And it will take exactly the same time.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting question, because when I started working with really large companies, I started to panic and think, oh God, I'm not a big enough company. But they're equally as crap at doing this stuff, and they're equally as bad as a startup. And in fact, startups are often better.
Cool.
Right. So I've got what, 10 minutes left?
Yeah.
Right. I'll keep going then. Now, I just want to introduce you. I just think this is a tool and a methodology that's really helpful. And if I go back a step here, it's really helpful in this whole business about objectives. So how do you set objectives, and what types of things do you need to put into objectives? I'd like to introduce you to a concept called OKRs, which stands for Objectives and Key Results. And it was originally started by Google, I think, and Cisco, but it's now prevalent in lots and lots of companies of all shapes and sizes. Startups love it, software companies love it. And there are 2 basic types: the strategic objectives and key results, and there are tactical ones. So you can see in that chart before, I was talking about both types. And if you think about a strategic objective is one that has about a year's horizon, and a tactical objective is one with a horizon of a quarter. So what I want to do is just to talk you through about what an OKR is. And basically, there are 3 things that you need to set. So when you're setting your objectives, whether they're strategic or whether they are tactical, this is a really nice tool to use because it's simple. The first thing you do is you set the objective, and the objective is a description of where you want to go, and it should set you a clear direction and should be motivational and stretching. So this is something you want to sort of get people excited with. We're going to go off and we're going to do this. Yeah. So a couple of examples, you might want to have something like smash last quarter's revenue growth and still keep our costs the same, or provide an awesome customer experience. Now, I know those sound a bit vague, and that's not a problem, but set them to be motivational, set them to be, it doesn't have to have time frames in it. Your time frame set by the fact you're doing this in a quarter. The really critical part of an OKR is what's called the key results. And the key results tell you how you're getting there. And these should be numerical, so something number-based, and I'll talk about examples of that in a minute, or Boolean. Boolean meaning they are either true or false, they've been completed or not completed. So, for example, if we said smash last quarter's revenue growth and still keep our costs the same, one key result we might have would be increase new bookings from 800,000 to 1 million. Now, if you think about that and you're regularly checking into this as an objective, that measure gives you something to keep seeing how your progress is going. So every month or every week, you could check in and say, okay, where are the bookings? And the person who's responsible for this objective could say, right, it's at 850 million, it's 850,000, it's 200, it's nearly 900,000 now. So we're progressing to where we want to be. It just gives concreteness to the objective that you're trying to set. And you should have 3 to 5 of these for each objective that you set. So the next one was increase net promoter score from 65 to 80. Again, something I can check in, something I can keep putting the pressure on the person who's responsible for this to see whether they're progressing in the direction I want them to go. The third element are initiatives. And essentially, these are all, you know, what are you going to do? What are the things that you're going to do to deliver those key results? What are the key actions you're going to do? So this might be, as an example, set up a new distributor in France, run 3 webinars a month. It might be do this, do that. So this essentially is your plan. Yeah. But anything in your plan, it should only be in the plan if it's going to affect a key result. If it's not going to affect a key result, shouldn't be in the plan. And that keeps your objectives really, really tight. And if you use the discipline that I've just said there, so you look at your objective, you look at your key results, you look at your plan. If the plan isn't delivering something that's going to affect those results, don't do it. So it's a really nice, simple way of working with objectives. Any questions?
Do you mind just repeating that bit about the thing that you said? If it doesn't meet with the plan, don't do it. I missed the bit just before that.
Okay, so if I've set myself the task to increase new bookings from 800,000 to 1 million, for example,
yeah,
I then go away and I do a plan. And what I'm suggesting is that every element of the plan must in some way contribute to that key result. If it doesn't, it shouldn't be in there because it's not having it's not serving the purpose you want it to have. And indeed, the standard advice with OKRs is you have an objective and then you have at maximum 3 to 5 key results so that when you're developing your plan, it's easy to see, does my plan deliver something that affects one of those key results? Yeah.
Cool.
Good. Now that's where I wanted to get to, Ollie, by the end.
Brilliant. That is fantastic. Any questions for Ludo, please?
I've gone. Was you going to go, Thomas? I was going to say, from me, one thing I would say is, as a business, you should look forward to doing something like this.
Absolutely.
It should all be sitting there going, oh, actually, I'm good at that, and I can do this, and I'm actually looking forward to doing it myself. So, and by the way, Ruben sent his message through and said, this is the best session that we've had. So he really,
oh, bless him. That's very kind of it.
Yeah, it's been really good.
And just, if I can just pick up on Gary's point, just a really important point. The thing I think is really critical when you're a startup is to continually reflect on your business and take it as an exciting thing to do. And, I recommend, certainly on the planning cycle, you saw I said do this, things every quarter. And I think that's really important. Don't get caught up in this whole thing of annual planning and build a plan and then revisit it a year later. It won't work. So it's got to be this thing where you get excited about doing this stuff and find time to think about this stuff. I think it's really important. So thank you for that, Gary. Good point.
Thomas?
The concept which I'm trying to develop has been born out of my experience as an engineer. So I know where the pitfalls are, I know where the problems are, and I'm trying to plug the gaps. But I'm finding it difficult to find customers insofar as the users are well below the customers in the pay grade and decision makers. So how would I go about finding the customers and the decision makers?
I don't know who your customer, I don't know what you're providing.
Yeah, so I'm trying to develop a digital twin technology, which includes business automation. So I'm automating engineering workflows and the data flows, and that leads to a digital twin in the chemical industries. So trying to find the customers, so the decision makers, so the directors, the lead engineers, and all of those.
Right. One of the approaches I would suggest here, and this is true of any startup, what this is often a problem. How do I find my customers? And one technique, I certainly used this when I was starting my own business, and I suggested others use it as well, is not to think about selling to start with, to take a complete flip of approach and say, right, I'm going to identify. So you must know the kind of people who you want to address. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So instead of contacting them and saying, can I come and talk to you, or can I send you information about my business, change the whole thing around and say, I am thinking about starting a business and I'd like to tap into your expertise, knowledge, experience, and so on. And I'd like to see if you've got half an hour to be interviewed to help me establish my business.
Okay.
Yep. And then when you see them, do it in a really structured way. So have a series of conversation questions that you want to ask them that are tapping into their knowledge and experience, but that are almost leading questions that get them to think, oh, you know, that's something I might not have in my business. So you ask them questions like, how do you do X? Do you have Y? If you don't have Y, how do you get around that problem? All those questions. And then each answer to the question often leads you to be able to say, would it help if you had a digital twin at that point? Yeah. And then you begin to say, so if you take that approach, instead of ringing someone up and saying, I want to come and tell you about my new business, they're going to just say, I get those approaches from people endlessly. If you play to their egos, ask them, find introductions to them as well. If you can find people, use your LinkedIn network to get you an introduction to them, that makes it a lot easier. Use the interview approach, use this whole non-selling approach. I mean, I did it, as I said, to 60 to 70 companies when I first started, before I'd even set the business up. And I got 3 jobs from it just through interviewing, because the questions I asked them were things like, how do you develop your strategy? What process do you follow? Do you have a structured approach? Do you use any tools? And I'd say, well, have you ever thought about using the business model? Oh, that looks good. Let's have a look at that. Can you help me with that? And I'd say, yeah, before I'd even set the business up, I had customers. And I'm sure the same can happen with you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Ludo, that was fantastic. Thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome. And I'm very, very happy to be contacted after this. If you've got any questions, or you want to ask me something, or you want me to point you to directions of other stuff I've talked about that I haven't had time to go through in any detail, very happy to help. I will send you my presentation, Ollie, and at the end of that, I'll put in my contact details. But my contact details are on my LinkedIn profile anyway. So
brilliant. Thanks, Ludo. There's a lot of members who weren't able to make it this morning. So we'll distribute the video and your slides next week, if that's okay, Ludo, and
sure.
that'd be wonderful. All right.